Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank. Denver's back again. The cryptozoology is probably one of my favorite subjects. Look, so I actually came across there's a site Denver you can go to. It's called Academia or ResearchGate. They're like these research institutions. Try
Mhm.
looking up anything to do with cryptozoology or anything like that. You'll have like people that are like, it's against my religious beliefs. I'm like, what are you talking about here? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's weird, man. There's a lot, a lot of weird stuff out there about it, but yeah, like on that site Academia you were talking about, there are a couple papers out there. Like one guy, Scott Martis, who died recently. He's got a few papers, about lake monsters on that site that you can download for free. So I would encourage people to check those out.
That's probably one of the biggest cryptids besides Bigfoot out there is anything to do with the lake. I think it's just because there's so much out there that there's not really you can't really say that there's nothing or there's not this or not that. They just found a scorpion. I think you're the one that posted the article about it that I read. That was like, what was it, like the size of like a car seat or something like that?
It was something stupid, man. It was like something I would never want to run into, and then not really cryptozoology related, but I posted an article in Egypt. I guess all these massive rains brought all these scorpions out of the ground, and I mean, like not just a few scorpions. I mean, it was almost like a biblical plague where these scorpions were just overrunning the place and stinging people. They had to like make room in hospitals and stuff for all these people coming in with scorpion stings. Just some crazy stuff going on, man.
Yeah, my Egyptologist friend was telling me about that, and I was like, you got to think though, like those all come from somewhere. Like, do you believe in like that? Maybe some of this ancient history or some of his myths might have like a sense of truth to it. Because I mean, I don't think people are that creative in a lot of these aspects. I think that's probably what gives Bigfoot one of its biggest arguments. Unless, I mean, even with any monster that was created in a film, they're created from our dreams, and your brain can't create new faces. It just takes in bits and
Hmm.
pieces of things that it's seen. And I was like, so these have to come from somewhere. Now, do I think there's a tablet that predicts, like everyone did before 2012, that the world was going to end on the Mayan calendar? No, I don't think it's like that, but I think it leads to something. I think it's a sliver of something that we've just over the years, over the transcribing of texts and different misinterpretations and kind of how everyone's ran off and did their own thing with it, has kind of been lost in a way. So I start to wonder, like, is there other keys to this earth? Hey, maybe even in the Vatican archives. I mean, there's a lot of information down there. They might have secret stuff about this earth that might actually be a key to maybe society in a way.
Yeah, I would venture to gamble that a lot of people talk about the government knowing things and stuff like that. But if I had one place, that I could just have unfettered access to, that's the place that it would be. Because they've been collecting stuff for centuries, right? And they're really, they're as powerful as any government on earth.
The Vatican's its own country. That's the
Yeah,
see, there's just stuff I start poking holes in where I start wondering like how much are we maybe keen on, or like I think there's two realms of thought is people don't want to think that like the government or these types of corporations are as powerful as they are, and then some people think they might be too powered up, and I'm like, I feel like there's a healthy middle. But I started questioning more when I started finding out that Disney had like investments in all these corporations, where I'm like, why are you invested in that? Like, why does Disney have a thing with Pfizer? I don't know, but I did not know that the show that makes the Little Mermaid or the movie Little Mermaid will be dealing in these types of realms. And now it just has me questioning more and more and more, where I'm going around getting people's thoughts. I'm on that academia site. I've been getting really into like, because there's categories for like metaphysical, but then if you look up anything like flat earth or younger dryas theory or any of these types of like kind of global evolutionary changes, there's just a large stern standing is that like, no, this is what happened. This is this. It can't be anything else. I'm like, well, I mean, evolution, at least I thought that we came from apes or we evolved from apes. A lot of people go, no, that's conspiracy. I'm like, what the hell's a conspiracy? Like something you don't agree with now.
yeah, yeah, and that's to me is the scary thing. You can't you just can't question anything anymore, right? I mean, you can't ask any questions without being shut down. I mean, you've seen so many people being deplatformed and things like that, just because they ask questions against the official narratives. And you're especially seeing it with this virus and the vaccines and things like that. And I'm not trying to get into into
Yeah.
all that really, but the point is, I think it's scary that that's what's being shut down now, any discussion on that. But who's to say it might be something closer to home later, right? And a lot of these people that are it's otherwise reasonable people pretty much fighting for want to see more censorship and things like that. And that's just a bad way to go, man.
Did you ever see, you know who Bill Nelson is?
Bill Nell. I mean, the name sounds familiar, but it's
He's in
I'm not pulling it off the top of my head though.
he's in a lot of like the new stuff that's going on with because he's the NASA director. So he's been lit up basically all
Okay,
over the
okay,
place when it comes to this UAP topic type thing. But I'm gonna
yeah.
show you this real quick. I'm gonna share screen this real quick. This is something he talked about that where he wants to because they're looking at Venus. They found a way to break through. And now look with this alien stuff. I've talked to a lot of people on it. I'm getting interested into it because I think this is the first time the government's given anything. But if you listen to this real quick.
And when we go
Can
to
you hear it?
Mars, we're going to continue this search of understanding who we are, where we came from, and what was before us, and may be foretelling of what is the future.
Does that not make you a little bit skeptical on some things?
Oh, I mean, like, absolutely. But
Saying about Mars, where we came from, learn a little bit more about ourselves. I was like, what are you saying now? Because there was a large theory for a long time before we even wanted to storm Area 51 2 years ago, which was the concept of maybe an asteroid hit Mars and we're those
mhm.
dust particles that evolved from there. Now, I still am the belief of chimps because I've seen two chimps at a zoo, and after 5 minutes of one of them getting a stuffed animal, he started masturbating with it, and I was like, I know we come from apes, 100% because of that little simple thing. And it's just it has me questioning more where even if we go to like the vaccine part too with fact checkers are just people that agree with the same narrative.
Right.
That's the weird part is I've never seen a flat earth fact check. I've
No.
never seen a Bigfoot fact check. I've never seen any of these things that you could easily say could be a conspiracy and have been widely considered them. Not saying Bigfoot is, but like the flat Earth one. But they go, hey, like no, we're just going to strictly stick on this topic. Where I start to question the word fact check. But even when you say fact check, if you say it's a conspiracy or if you say it's not real, then they look at you like, oh, because you're the conspiracy one. It's like
Mhm.
the words have given them power now. So I'm curious if I'm going to see something about talking more in the realms of cryptozoology, because that's the whole point of switching it from UFO to UAP was. It was going to lump in paranormal. It was going to lump in all those different categories. So I'm just I mean, if they're going to tell us that to learn more about our roots when we're discovering Mars, I'm wondering if there's anything that they're willing to tell us also that comes to maybe the realms of like a Bigfoot or some type of, creature out there that might just be a one-off, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Like you're saying about the fact checkers. I mean, these people, if you dig into these fact checkers, they're always of the same political ideologies. Always. I mean, there are no libertarian fact checkers out there, or
They don't get
right
platformed.
wing conservative type fact checkers out there. As far as I know, I mean, I could be wrong, but I doubt it. They're all of the exact same political persuasions. They're all of the exact same, corporate media type bias, whatever the corporate media and these powerful social media platforms, whatever narrative they're trying to push. It's always in agreement with that. And then you get in, to the government disclosing or some of these things, you know I'm real skeptical of that. It's like after all these years of keeping a lid on everything, why would they be disclosing things now? And whatever they're disclosing, I mean, it could just be misinformation or just a little piece of truth, probably just to steer public perception in a way of funneling money into some kind of programs that they want to start or something like that. I mean, I think all this UAP stuff coming out, I think the end goal, I think there's a little bit of truth in there, but I think there's a whole lot of misinformation there. And I think the end goal is really just to start some kind of probably new black programs but this time with the public, oh yeah, that, behind it, whereas before the public would be against things like that, whereas before the public used to be against censorship. They can steer the narrative and steer public opinions and things the way that they want to.
I 100% agree with you. That was what I've said to like every UFO person I've had on the show so far. Is I've talked about like it seems like a push for funding, um,
That's
mostly
all it is.
yeah, because there's an interview in 1993 about the AIDS pandemic with a guy named Kerry Mullis, and Kerry Mullis is the guy who invented our PCR test. And he talked about Fauci, he talked about Peter Daszak, he talked about basically everybody who's getting in trouble now. And he was like, "Don't trust any of these people. Like they're not people you should listen to." And everything he's literally said in this like 2 hour interview, it's so eerie. I get goosebumps even talking about it because it's just like how I'm talking to you. It's just a random guy decided to go meet this dude, do an interview at his house. He's sitting on a wood chair and a Rainforest Cafe t-shirt, and he's like talking about like all these drugs. He goes, "Nobody knows what's going on with science. They say use the science, but what science? They don't describe it to you. They just give you a word." And he's just like going into it. I'm like, this is like the most non-biased I've ever heard. And he goes, "I'm a libertarian." I was like, "All right, that's what it is. You're middle road. I'm middle road as well too." But hearing him talk, it was just so eerie where I start looking at things like, why are they choosing to disclose all of this now? What is the point of this? And then you see North Korea or whoever, China has hypersonic missiles or something like
Hmm.
that. I'm like, that's a push for funding.
Yeah.
You knew that was happening long time ago, but it's a push for funding that you're talking about it now. It's all it is a money grab. And I think that comes with they've lied so many times, they've done so much manipulational tactics that it's so hard to find trust. So maybe being outright or giving information, if it might be 5 years late or 10 years late, it's just going to try and find a way to get morale back again. And it has me curious because Avi Loeb is an astrophysicist or astronomer, and he was in a recent like interview, and I can pull that up as well too if you'd like to see it. But he's talking about it like, well, we know they've created artificial clones, and he glosses over it, and he gets onto the main alien topic or main extra dimensional topic, and everyone's like, a lot of
No.
people for the first time would have been like, "What do you mean they have
Yeah.
clones of us?" And he goes, "Yeah." He acted like it was nothing. The government's way past that. They cloned a sheep in 1994 or whatever. You think they stopped at a sheep? Really? Come
Or you
on.
think, or that's the first one you actually heard about. That's the first one they trotted out. I mean, they might have actually done something similar 20 years ago, 20 years, back in the 70s. You know what I'm saying?
I just feel like they're way advanced, and now like it's like you know
Hmm.
how they say they're 50 years advanced or something like that. The
Hmm.
government's tech is. I feel like
Yeah.
they should have been releasing a bunch of stuff to slowly trickle into what they have now, and they've just been on the neglecting side of it for the past 5 years. So they're like, "Oh, dude, we got to start releasing this stuff." It's like, well, we just went from iPhones to maybe that's why they do an iPhone every 2 years. I don't know, conspiracy time there, but I start looking at it like if they can trick you that way, how easy is it to just start looking through things and being able to recreate things? There was an idea of creating Playatorium Park, which was a mammoth, bringing mammoths back and having
Hmm.
them as a reserve in Russia. How easy would it be to find a way to splice DNA together and create maybe a Bigfoot or create some type of one of these myths or folklores to keep people distracted from something? That's the best bet we would have an opportunity to see one.
Yeah, and I mean, like along those same lines, and it kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier, how these plagues in the Bible and ancient myths come from somewhere. I mean, what if some of your old, say, what if some of like your old stories from Greek mythologies, these chimeras and things like that? I mean, what if that is some sort of, some sort of an ancient, hazy memory of, these genetic experiments that we're doing now? What if something were going back in ancient times or things like that? What if there was a civilization, long before us that were, engaging in these type of things. I mean, that's the kind of things, I think about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm in that realm there with you, but I think the main question you got to ask is, do you think that because I'm more in the belief that there's probably ancient things here, like ancient creatures, dinosaur style things, like alligators are basically dinosaurs or
Yeah.
crocodiles are dinosaurs. But I mean, something deeper and deeper. I mean, they just found, there was dino fish that happened, and then they found there's another scorpion thing that I was talking about, which was that there was a deep aquatic scorpion they think that had been extinct for 6 million years, and
Uh-huh.
they just found it, and it's like the size of a car, like a
Yeah.
driver's seat. It's the size of one of those things. It's fucking huge. And I think there's a lot more deeper down in the ocean because time just distorts differently down there because there's no sunlight to be able to depict what, like, if a day passes or not. It's just all
Hmm.
constant blackness. And I wonder if is it more of the belief that we'll start unlocking more of these things or maybe finding out a megalodon exists? I have no clue. It's probably deep down in there or something darker or bigger or something older is down there, or maybe recreating it through the tech that the government has. I mean, if they can make clones or if they can make these, enhanced specimens, that's Avi Loeb's whole thing was like, instead of sending humans into space, send these clones, send these things that it doesn't matter if a body dies. They're not people. They're just art. They're
Hmm.
recreations. That was his wole push.
Yeah.
Now, is that
What could go wrong with that?
yeah, I mean, it's like you have to dumb the intelligence down, give them like a Happy Meal or something to make sure they're
Yeah.
slower. But
Mhm.
I look at the concept of like, I'm more in belief that there's things here that can probably change the scope of this earth, whether it's an environmental impact or whether there's just a reset that happens to do with something bigger coming out when we unlock that door. But I also think that our inevitable downfall will end up being our own, much like every old ancient history civilization possible. It's all been the boiling down to feuds with amongst themselves, where they destroy their own progress and completely wipe themselves off the map. Because old ancient civilizations aren't a conspiracy. That's real stuff that's out there. The idea of Atlantis is a little bit that's on the skeptical side because no one's ever found it. But have we searched everywhere? I mean, that's the thing, is that it hasn't been searched everywhere. We're coming across ancient ruins underwater all the freaking time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think you're right as far as, us destroying ourselves, but I'm not really of the belief that, it would necessarily be, climate change or things like that destroy us. But I think, like you're saying, I mean, these guys are openly talking about, like, building clones and sending them to space, and once you open up these kind of doors and stuff, I mean, who knows where, what kind of bad stuff could start happening with things like that going on.
There's this is
Because
this
then what would you be doing too? You'd be, if you're creating clones to send them to space, well, guess what? Now we're going to create an army of clones to fight our wars, and
it's easier to dispose a clone body than it is
yeah,
a real
and then
body.
so maybe wars would get a lot bigger in scope and destruction than they are now, right? Because you're just, sending an army of disposables over there. I don't know, man. Between stuff like that and, some of this AI technology and stuff, you could easily, envision a scenario in your mind where, maybe we're not around in 500 years.
I love this type of talk because nobody ever wants to get like down this rabbit hole, and I'm like, the reason why it sounds crazy is because they haven't. There's never been any of this like this before. This is like revolutionary. And it's like, I don't think it's never been here. I think it's just now we're seeing it because the exposure, like the whole reason social media is really good in an aspect is only because it exposes so much. There used to be a narrative that the media had with the government, which was that they had a reset button. At any time, the government would be able to reset your life and fix everything like it was brand new. Nothing, all that pain you had, no, it all goes away. The media was really good at distorting that narrative. Then everyone kind of saw it with social media and the amount of individual journalism that exposed it all was like, you guys don't have a button that resets it all. And instead of saying they don't, they double down. And that's when it gets worse. And that's where we're in this era right now where everyone goes, you can't trust this, you can't trust that. You can't like I'll show you this. Like me even saying this to you before would sound like a conspiracy if it wasn't this. But this is the oldest scorpion known to science. This was October 29th in or the one article I came across did right up
Yeah.
here. Um Dog-sized prehistoric sea
Yeah.
scorpion fossil
I-
found in South China. This was October 29th, 2021. It's a scorpion that's the freaking size of a dog, man.
yeah.
I mean,
It's ridiculous.
443.8 million years ago. I
Yeah.
mean, you start looking at these concepts of like, we still have a lot left here to do. And
Hmm.
everyone's so worried about going out and trying to figure out where we came from, if we did come from another planet, which to me might sound like a little bit of a goose hunt, where I start looking at what about what's here that we don't even have understood yet? I mean, is there a fear to get off this planet as soon as possible because climate change or maybe something's coming? I have no clue. But I start to understand a little bit more about saying something is out of the realm of possibility that something doesn't exist. I mean, even if you're in Virginia right now, the what is it? Oh God, I have a picture. The Mothman. I have a little statue of him in my room.
Hmm.
But the Mothman, is that out of the realm of possibility? I don't think so. Is it somewhat maybe storied up? Sure. But I think there's a big giant thing that might lead into an aspect of why that story exists in the first place. I didn't know Maryland had a cryptid, I would say. It's the goat man. It's like a
Yeah.
scientist who was in a lab that half spliced his DNA with a goat. And I don't know why every single villain has to carry an axe or something, but his story has an
Yeah.
axe in it. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's interesting because you start looking and understanding more about where these came from. Was it a fear to keep kids inside of their homes instead of exploring out late at night or partying or doing something like that? I have no clue. But when we find the conflation of truth mixed with the conflation of what makes a good story is the basis of like what's important to be someone who studies cryptozoology or someone who works in this field, because you start to be able to find the lines of when they might have lost a little bit of an aspect of what is actually true because the story sounded so good.
Yeah, I mean, you've got those stories. I mean, you've got those stories everywhere. I mean, we've got these, your Maryland goat man. You've got those in Texas. You got them in Kentucky. I mean, you got along the same lines. You got these like pig lady or pig man stories, things like that, and they're kind of all over as well. So, these Mothman. You've got other winged humanoid type of creatures that have supposedly been spotted, all over the world. So I mean, these ideas come from somewhere.
Do you think that these things still exist? Like Bigfoot, a species of ape the size of like that. It's the same reason why with the Yeti. How did they get the same exact descriptions, even though they were halfway across the countries or halfway across the world from each other and had no communication to each other? They had the same exact descriptions. Do you think that it's something in a place where maybe there's less people? Because my buddy who works as an astronomer in Africa, he sent me a picture of his observatory. You get to see the sky, man, like stars, a lot
Hmm.
of them. And I'm like, I don't see that at all when I'm down here. I'm looking up and I
Yeah.
see one or two, and I think one's a satellite. And he goes, yeah, because we don't have a lot of lights, so there's not a lot of light
Yeah.
pollution. And I just go, what else? If I go to Alaska or if I go to Antarctica, am I going to come across something that might be different than here? Is the air different? Probably clear. But what about something that might be hiding or something that might still be around that everything else, maybe Bigfoot or all these have been wiped off because of us?
Yeah, I mean, like you're talking about, with the sky, traveling around last year, I was down on the Mexican border, down at the Big Bend area of Texas, and I mean, you can actually see the Milky Way like very bright. And, like where I'm from in Virginia, even if you're, way out in the country, the stars are, like in the national forest, places like that, the stars are much brighter, but you can't see the Milky Way like that. There's just so few people and things like that down there. And, you can just drive for, sometimes like 30 miles and not even pass a car. Um, you know, I've been, I've been to Peru in the Amazon, and I mean it's just so vast. And I mean, when I come from there, I just thought that anything, I mean, literally like anything, could be hiding in there. It's just so vast, so thick, so impenetrable. I wouldn't be surprised if any kind of undiscovered type of monster or creature or something weird that you can't really even wrap your head around or think of could be in there. There's just so many places, and even like I said, places here in the States that just have so much land area and places that if it's not like off a road or a trail, people don't really even venture into. And I'm just of the belief that, you combine that with like you were talking about earlier, our oceans, how unexplored they are. I think there could literally be anything, lurking on our planet.
I'm not afraid that we've killed it off. I'm afraid that we've killed off the curiosity or the doorway to want to explore those types of things, because when my buddy sent me that picture and I see that galaxy or that Milky Way like that, I'm like, I get all excited. I would like, if I was on a vacation right now, I could be with the love of my life, the Kate Upton, I don't, Mariah Carey. I could be right next to her with a pina colada in hand, and I would not leave that beach because I would be looking up at the stars and be like, this is the most beautiful thing. And I don't know why I don't have this back home. But when you
Yeah.
get back home and you see that there's only a couple lights in the sky, there's barely anything, you get a disconnect. You get a
Yeah.
kind of a type of thing where it's like, I mean, I don't know why people want to explore out there. There's nothing out there, or there is stuff out there, but I can't see it. So you don't have the thing to it.
Yeah.
Same thing with s- exploring or going camping. You know, from being outside or having a bonfire outside. I know from camping when I was a kid. It's you see it, you feel it, you're around it, you love it, you experience those moments, and you really appreciate just being hearing the crackling of fire, I mean, just being out in the air, whether it's cold or whether it's hot, just that fresh air that really hits you. And depending on where you're at, how many people are in your area, you start to see that the air starts to get clearer. And I think that gives a discovery for people to want to venture outside of the four walls that they build up inside of themselves. And in life as well too, with their homes, it gets very, very difficult to have that sense of connection when you completely shut the door. And I think
Yeah.
maybe that's why there's not a lot of people that want to explore the oceans, is because not a lot of people spend days and days and days upon boats. That's why people who go Alaskan crab fishing or anything of these types of deadliest catch, whatever you want to call it, they really have an appreciation for being out on the water and really take care of the water because they work in it. They've been around it. It's now a part of them. And it's something that you can lose. And I think maybe a reason why civilization might be lost is on an aspect of, I think people don't really understand their roots. And now I'm starting to think that I think something's keeping the key pieces from us. And I don't know if that's government. I don't know if that's the Vatican. I just think there's an important part of our history that we've lost as a human species, and I think they're hiding it because they think that it might be bad. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't really want to. I'll take it warts and all, if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, and I think like you're saying, there's people don't want to explore anymore. And and I think a lot of that is magnified by these narratives we have that there is nothing out there. I mean, anytime somebody mentions a Bigfoot or lake monster, or you could expand that into some of the conspiracies that we're talking about. I mean, right now we don't have social media fact checkers flagging your Bigfoot posts, right? But they're flagging other posts asking questions. We're in this we're in this time in our history where just basic curiosity about things going on with current events, it is being flagged. You do have social media now that gets away from the mainstream news, but you can see how the mainstream is trying to control the narrative on social media.
Yeah.
And so what you have, people that ask questions and people that spend time outdoors and explore and search. These people are hard to control, right? Because they ask questions, they think for themselves. And you can almost see why there's such a big push to kind of shut that down now.
Well, people identify themselves through their social media now, and the people that aren't attached to it. Like for me, I only post and I ghost. If I have to reach out to someone, I'll reach out to someone, but I don't need to spend
Yeah.
all my days checking my followers or doing that
Yeah.
hours and hours of minutes just posting or trying to make sure people see that I'm there. I
Yeah.
don't care if you like a post or not. If you like it, cool. But I like you, so you don't have to like every single one of my posts. I don't expect that you to require that from me either. But people invest their time into social media,
Yeah.
which it gets hard. It's very weird in today's time because the one thing okay, so like let's bring up, let's say cancer, for instance. Cancer. Somebody beats it. You don't give a shit how they beat it. But with the vaccine and COVID, they give a shit how you
Yeah.
beat it. And that's the
Yeah.
weirdest thing to me, where I'm like, you don't care if you hear someone cured cancer off of eating a banana a day,
Yeah.
whatever, but it worked for them, right? But this is
All
the
right.
only thing that we've devised. And I think that's because we let politics step in the side. And that's what happens when you pick teams.
Yeah.
And that's what's scary to me, where I start to wonder, like, this isn't just this might be the start, but this isn't going to end here. It's going to go on
No.
to other things. And I'm very
Oh,
scared of what that's going to end up being.
well, and you can see like people that used to otherwise be reasonable, right? You have something that scares them, and rightly so. I mean, a lot of people have gotten sick and died from this virus, but the fear makes people easier to control. And then when you throw in the politicization, right, you got one side doing this, one side doing that, and there's no room for anybody in the middle, right, that can kind of just be like, well, hey, wait a minute, or can I just no, you can't ask, you
Yeah.
can't ask, you got to pick your team, right? And then it's just bad. I think it's going to, and especially with they've really ramped up the social media censorship with this, and I think that's definitely going to, go to other things soon. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's gonna get worse.
I just wonder, because I think every little step or everything goes, this is a major innovation for people. And I'm like, I don't know about that, because it always goes a little bit farther. They see, the issue is like the reason, like, I would like to ban all harmful content online when it comes to someone bullying another person. If you make someone so depressed they kill themselves, that's horrible. But I can't say that because you can move the goalposts. So you have to let that
Exactly.
be up there. So I would be a hypocrite if I said only the bullying stuff. That doesn't make sense. It's a double standard. If you gotta have a rule, and then I don't want any censorship. If someone's doing it, that's a harmful thing. And hopefully that person doesn't, hurt themselves. But at the same time, if I say that, then that gives them the room to start banning content that they might deem as bullying, or they might deem as this,
Yeah.
when it might not be at all. I mean, YouTube, it's hard because the hours of content, but if I read you the YouTube guidelines or standards of things you can talk about, you can't mention any drug, especially the one that starts with an I that works for this,
Mm-hmm.
that is used for this thing.
Yeah.
You can't. They call it horse medicine. You
Yeah.
can't mention that. You can't mention anything about, oh, this does this or this does that. Anything that even talks about the word is just like, it's taboo. And I'm like, you understand? That's creating disinformation in itself, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really weird. Medical misinformation and disinformation are two different things. Misinformation means you accidentally said something that doesn't make sense or doesn't go with that
Yeah.
medical information that they have. Disinformation means you purposely intended to do that. And that's like, it's really weird because I'm sitting here like, the words that you guys say, it might not be a big change, but the meaning of it is a very big change. The
Yeah.
lettering is the same, but the meaning is different. Like lockdown and quarantine are two of the same things, but one sounds aggressive and the other one sounds passive as hell.
Yeah.
Actually, you're a good person if you quarantine. And
Yeah.
I get to this point where I'm like, this is going to affect other things.
Yeah.
This is going to lead into other people's lives where eventually maybe 20 years down the line, maybe even a couple of years down the line, you're going to have people that are going to be really messed up and not know how to talk or how to even associate with other people because they don't know what their brain has been morphed to now. We all agree on this standard of that. The reason why we have laws is we all agree that certain actions are bad and you need to pay for those actions. But how long until someone's wires get crossed where it doesn't seem like a bad thing anymore because now they're looking at it through this lens because you've brainwashed them into thinking that.
Yeah. And the thing is like, it is going to leach over into other things, and that's been my whole problem with all this. And that's kind of the fine line you walk in a free society, and freedom of speech, right? I mean, there's a very fine line, but if I've got to err, I'm going to err on the side of, being able to say whatever you want, because I think that's far less dangerous than having all these rules, and people saying what you can and cannot say. And then what you always got to look at too is like, who's like, we'll just use fact checkers as an example, but it could be anybody, right? It could be the politicians, it could be a police, or whoever. It's like, who's watching those guys? you know how do you know that, that they're how do you know that your fact checkers are actually right, or your politicians actually have your best interest at heart? And the thing is that's going to all change with whoever's in power, right? Like the people clamoring for to shut down speech now, that's because their side might be in charge, right? But that can be used against them, when their enemies, become
Yeah.
in positions of power, and this stuff can be turned inward on them and stuff. And so that's kind of where we're at, or well, we're not really there yet.
It's
Excuse me,
going
but
there. I mean,
yeah, i
it's
think i
going
think
there.
that if you continue down this path another 10 years, things might look totally different than they do right now.
Well, if you start banning everything and you start labeling things as certain things that you deem as unfit for people to consume,
Yeah.
then you're not letting people discover this out for themselves. You're not letting people enhance their own experience by understanding. For instance, when you were a kid and you had $20 or something, you would go to the store. You understood like when someone would, if you got scammed or if you paid too much or if you needed more money, you had to go back. Then you learned to start cautioning how you spend your money. You start going, okay, I can buy this, or I could buy one of these, or I could buy multiples of these. You start learning because you've been put in this situation rather than your first time when you went there and just blew your $20 real quick. You had more of an opportunity and understanding of how things work. All the information out there. The reason why these flat Earth debates, these JFK debates keep going on is you're not being honest with them. You're not giving them the information that they need, but you're not letting people experience this. Then see, there's a weird side where people like daddy. People love daddy. There, people want daddy in their life. I used to think, hey, the government should provide you health care, but then my buddy kind of brought me in on this. He goes, now, if the government gives you health care and you go and try and sue the government, they gave it to you for free. So what are you suing about? You don't have any right to. And I go, fuck,
Yeah.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, people want more government, but we don't even have them as it is. And the parts that they do play really fuck up your life in a way. They don't care. Like I had someone at my work come in and literally walk in the door. I was like, how's it going? They're like, yeah, how's your day going? I was like, another day, another dollar. And he goes, yeah, but not a full dollar. Uncle Sam gets a piece of that. And I go, that's fucking true, man. There's a death tax. That's how I know the world's fucked. And you start getting to this point where you understand like there's essential stuff, but I think people need to understand is that you have to go out on your own at one point. Your kid has to
Yeah.
leave out the door at 18 or do whatever they have to do to go experience their life. A mama bird has to push their babies away. The government's not your mama bird. It's a protector or it's there for you against foreign influences. But I think you have to go out on your own and you have to understand you've been on your own already. And I think this is what's going to lead into is that if we start disassociating, if we start doing these types of things where there's sides and there's camps and there's all these types of tribal type thinking, and you start banning a certain side because it doesn't fit your narrative and you own these giant platforms, then you're going to have people that don't understand that the earth isn't flat. You're going to have people that are going to be putting all these things into banned categories where they start getting into these directions. First of all, I've never seen outside of the earth. So I've only seen what's on here. So I don't know if it's flat or not. That's not a hill I'm going to die on.
Yeah.
But people will be more than happy to. And I think this starts because people already distrust the system as it is. And
Hmm.
when they say this is bad, you start being like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, you
It's
just,
going to put cryptozoology in a banned category where there's going to be a lot of people. And I think maybe the reason why they would do something like that was because there would be a bunch of stupid kids trying to explore something they shouldn't, like the Pope licking monster is on a fucking
yeah.
bridge. Like
Yeah.
that's dumb shit. But someone will do that because you told them not to. I'm the type of
Right.
person you tell me to do something, I'm more than likely probably going to do the opposite.
Yeah, and I mean, to a lot of people, sounding these alarm bells about cryptozoology or this or that might sound, kind of crazy to a lot of folks. But I mean, what we're talking about is, the thing with cryptozoology, or you name it, UFOs or this or that. Once you go down this rabbit hole, right, it branches off into all kinds of other stuff, right? You could be studying about a cryptid and go down this rabbit hole, and then all of a sudden you're over here into UFOs, or you're over here into this buried treasure tale. I mean, everything just kind of goes off in all these different directions, and eventually, you could be trying to learn a little bit about Bigfoot, but next thing you know, you're down some rabbit hole where it's questioning an official government narrative or something like that. And then you figure, oh, I've been lied to about this. What else have I been lied to about? And you just branch off onto all these other different things. And that's going to, upset the people that want to control the flow of information.
Do you ever come across things that you can't look into because it's like government blocked or anything like that? Because like when I look into the UFO stuff, I come across a lot of stuff that's just not there.
I really, as far as like the cryptozoology stuff, no. I don't. I'm into UFOs, but I don't really go too far into it these days. Especially, I've kind of took a break from even really reading up a whole lot on that stuff, and mostly that's because I've been turned off by a lot of this UAP stuff. I think that it's mostly just BS, misinformation. I think going down those avenues is really just going to be a waste of my time, because I think that you know mo- a lot of it is disinformation, a lot of it is misinformation, and ultimately I think like we talked about earlier, the big push is just for more funding, and more wasted tax dollars, basically. And so I've just kind of disassociated myself from some of that for the time being.
Can I give you my little theory about the guy I showed you at the beginning of the show, Bill Nelson?
Yeah, go go ahead.
I think the government decided that they needed like a fake job or a fake thing, and they
Yeah.
hired somebody to work in a secret category. Like, don't tell them that they're not working in a real thing, but just talk to someone and say, I want you to spend all your time looking
Yeah.
into alien stuff. And the guy goes, okay, so you're saying they exist? And he goes, we're not saying that they exist. We just want to monitor some things. And I
Yeah.
feel like they might have gotten this person, and that's why he's able to walk up on stage because he's not an actor. He can't just fake the way he thinks or the way he talks. But I think he fully actually believes the thing that he's saying. So I'm like, either he did accidentally come across something and the government's like, holy shit, he fucking found something, or he's like just going up on stage and like let him talk and distract everybody while we do the inner working stuff. I believe that there's a more secret core to this thing, and people wonder like, you mean Illuminati? I'm like, but I don't think it's. I think we see it all the time. It's just people that have enough money to be able to play the system their way. See, my thought is if you're a billionaire or if you're famous, you can't be rich at the same time. You can't be rich and you can't be famous. Those are two evils that nobody can handle properly. And
Yeah.
I think you need to find it. If you're going to be famous, then you should be able to live, but you shouldn't be able to just do whatever the fuck you want. And sadly, there's a weird thing now where people can either be paid off or people have enough credit that they just get slipped right through. true. And I think it rigs the system, and then it really fucks with people's heads in a way where I start looking at it a little bit more closely. Like, do I believe any of the stuff the NASA guy's saying? I don't know. But it's a very weird time where I don't look at the core issue that everyone looks at. I look at like, why now? Why the
Yeah.
fuck are you doing it now when we see Fauci with beagles and you see all this type of stuff going on? Like it's very, very, it's plotted.
Yeah, it is. It all is, and that's the thing that I do the same thing. I always point to it. I remember like when this UAP stuff started coming out, and people are inboxing me. Oh my God, did you see? Oh, David admitted. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, but duh. I mean, everybody already knew that anyway. Just so they finally maybe admitted something or released something. That's not disclosure, guys. I mean, the people that were accusing the government for 70 years of hiding everything are all of a sudden now thinking that the government's coming clean and and giving them the
Yeah.
truth. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's laughable. It really is. It's laughable. And you were just talking about, like Fauci and the Beagles. I mean, it's sad, but everything is so polarized now. I mean, these awful beagle experiments. I mean, they've been going on for decades and decades. They choose beagles because they're a sweet little docile dog. I have a beagle. It's horrific. It's not just Fauci. It's universities. It's these people experiment on them too, and it took because we're so polarized, right? It took people on the right that hate the vaccines or hate Fauci to, all of a sudden they're upset about beagles, but you never heard a word about it before, right? You know what I'm saying? We're so polarized and everybody's on this side or that side that something like torture and beagles, isn't even bad until your enemy's doing it. If that makes any sense.
I feel like the only time you can ever get people to snap out of stuff, and I think this was like we usually see like a little bit of breaks or little types of things that snap people out of this trance that they're in. And I think the Beagle thing was probably the longest time we've seen something which finally just surfaced, which was that.
Yeah.
And I think puppies is like the main thing that shocks everyone out of their
Yeah.
fucking back into their state of like, oh my God, what's going on? Because you become on autopilot. You get so
Yeah.
used to so many things for so long. I think everyone's gotten used to it. I mean, you probably notice it more right now because you're driving from different state to state. You're going from like different mask mandates. There's still some
Hmm.
that are doing those. You walk
Yeah.
into a store and everyone's like,
Yeah.
non-believer, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
And they're like, you gotta wear a fucking mask, and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm from fucking Florida, like I
Yeah.
don't know, like
Yeah.
different places think of it differently.
Yeah. That's been one of the craziest thing because we started RV in full time. Let's see, September 2020. And so it was crazy just going from one state to another, right? We were in Tennessee where there weren't really any mandates, but when we were in Nashville, they're big time. Like you couldn't go anywhere without one. So we go over to Missouri. There's no mandates. You can go, pretty much do whatever you want. You're in Georgia, yeah, there's mandates, but like in Savannah, you couldn't go anywhere without one. But then out in the mountains in Georgia, like you could do whatever you wanted, and then I stayed in Florida, for a few months. And, I mean, people across the country were hating on Florida, but I could tell you like around the Orlando area, things like that. Nah, you had to wear one if even like if you wanted to go into Publix. I mean, I guess you could have went in without one, but everybody was wearing them and things like that. And so it's just weird, not
I
just
can't be different.
from
I can't be different.
yeah, just from states and even within states, like different localities and things. And that's been one of the craziest thing. And then like after more people got vaccinated and stuff, and in states that I thought you would have to wear a mask to go anywhere, they laxed up a little bit. So it's been really weird as far as that goes. So it
And
just changes wherever you're at.
that's how it started. And then what it's gotten to now is literally at this point where you'll see people tweet articles in high hopes of like, up numbers are up again, like just
Yeah.
on it like a fucking alarm call. And I'm
It's
like,
like it's like people are rooting, if you're pro pro lockdown or pro mask. It's almost like people are rooting for numbers to go up just to say I told you so. Doesn't it seem like that in a lot of cases?
yeah, because I mean, I'm like that with the lab. Like I was so pro from it from the beginning, just on a like we should fucking look into it, and then
Yeah,
everyone's like it's a conspiracy, and then once Trump got out of office, you wonder how that narrative flopped around to
it
like okay,
changed,
maybe we should
didn't
look
it?
in there.
Yeah, like soon as he left, it changed, and it shouldn't be like that, man. It should be like whatever, wherever the information leads is where you should look. It
Well,
shouldn't
they
matter who's in office or who's in charge. I mean,
just like they found the receipt for the Beagle thing, they did the second thing with Rand Paul and Fauci again, and I watched the second one. His hands weren't shaking that time, so you can knock out the fact that he might have a medical condition. He goes,
yeah,
"Well, you didn't describe it in the way we did do gain of function, but not in the way that you're saying." And I'm like,
yeah,
it's fucking legal speak. And I'm like, Jesus. I'm like, he lied, but it's fine, whatever. We're gonna move past it. But I mean, the day we're recording this is the 19th, but today is supposed to be the day that he's supposed to talk about the Beagle thing or
oh really?
describe what was going on. But I don't know. Um,
Yeah,
I just get to this point where I'm like, man, I love it how the people that'll sit there and tweet all the bad stuff and love this fear narrative. I think society's starting to really kind of see that there's not just two groups of people anymore. There used to be people that you knew were good, and then there used to be
mm-hmm.
people that you knew probably had some sin to them, a little bit of bad people. Now it's at this point where there's people that love the fear narrative that just want to watch the good people get scared and the bad people just get more angry. And it's like
Yeah,
sparking up another divide where I'm like, it's very, very strange. And I think it's kind of like when you get to watch like a fight video or something, you get to go, oh shit, these people are about to fight. It's that anticipation. It's that little bugger of a devil that's inside of us that likes to see that play out. And I think that's an issue with a lot of people, but it's hard to know that if you're doing that because a lot of people believe exactly what they're being told. And I'm like, I don't think anything is just like how they say it. I'm not a news person. They're not news people either. They're just people that are spinning a narrative. For me, I'm just understanding and I'm looking at all things. And this is my perspective. I'm not saying facts. I'm not saying definitive things at all. I'm just
yeah.
trying to sort through everything that's out there. And it's so much information where I can understand why people give up.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly right. People do kind of give up, and it's you just it's impossible to know what to believe about anything anymore because things are so polarized and everybody's got an agenda. You can't trust anything the media says. I mean that's always been the case, but it seems even worse now. You just can't trust anything they say.
Do you think they might have like with giants, for instance, do you think that they might have destroyed them or maybe found a maybe they're hiding something? Because I remember like when I was in middle school hearing articles about them and reading a lot about them. Like it was like in the news, like found this Iceman, found this type thing, found these giant bones. Now it's like you don't hear a lot now where I'm like, did you find them all or did you just realize that like my buddy he hunts or looks for through iron bog sites of like minerals from Vikings and all these types of old age steel, and he goes, the school doesn't want to fund this project because they might have pagan roots and nobody wants to acknowledge the pagan roots. And I'm
Mm,
like, do you think that's like with us? Like maybe we don't want to know where we came from, maybe a possibility of a giants or a type of beast that we might have hunted to extinction, much like the polar bear. You notice how you don't see any more commercials of them on Coke anymore is
yeah.
because the fucking environment, people are getting too upset by it. So they took it off. It's like, do you think that might be what it is? That maybe they're not telling us about this type of ancient history because we might have destroyed our own roots in a sense, or like the dodo apparently went extinct from people hunting it to the end of extinction. And that's my fucking mascot. So I'm like, yeah, like I'm pro underdog, but I think maybe nobody talks about that. You don't learn that history because it's horrible. And the ones that they want to tell you are things that are going to get you mad at this country, like about Christopher Columbus or some shit. Like I'm starting to look at like something like a giant. maybe the reason why we don't have a whole lot of information that I've seen, or the public doesn't have a whole lot of discourse on it, is because maybe we killed those things, or us building things caused their habitat to close down, or some type of thing that happened over generations upon generations. Or maybe if they told people, they would hate their government or hate us even more.
Well, I think like with giants, mostly I think that that was mostly covered up long ago, and I just think that at the time when this stuff was covered up, it was more that it was an inconvenient thing to have. I mean, you gotta it upsets the apple cart. It upsets our understanding of history and all that, and it's one of those things that just couldn't really be allowed. It just opens up too much of a can of worms. And you see it over and over in those old reports and stories of these discoveries of giant bones where they were sent to the Smithsonian, and not just giant bones, but discoveries of pygmy bones and things like that, sent to the Smithsonian. And I'm not saying that the Smithsonian is engaging in some kind of a cover up now, but I do think that, decades ago, that they probably did just, dispose of. I don't think that they even have these bones and things anymore. I think that they probably just disposed of them just because of the, it just upsets everything we know. I mean, you can't just go rewriting history books. I mean, it's a lot at stake.
You know what a weird double standard is I've talked to a lot of archaeologists and anthropologists, and they go, you cannot put your mindset that you have now in the time period of back then because we think differently. But then why can we use their mindset from back then to our mindset now? It's like really weird. You can't go back, but you can sure as hell go forward.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, isn't it?
Because I started looking at it, I was like, well, if I was going to think, if I had, let's say, power, for instance, power was written, like wars and all this stuff was written down because it was seen as a sign of strength in a society. That's why everyone's like, oh my God, it's all about wars. It's like, because that's all they cared about writing down. Which you can understand now, because in some aspects, if you want to seem strong, if you want to impress, you want to brag about all the things that you have, not the things that you don't. But we look at, like, let's say, maybe me and you are way back in like the cavemen days or something. We just killed something and we knew that was the last of that species. Bury it, make sure nobody finds it, and then wipe our hands like we didn't do it. If I think that now, they sure as fuck thought that back then. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't know why people don't think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think you got a point there. Yeah.
Because I mean, giants, for instance, you tell me that they didn't hunt down all the giants or kill the giants for food or something like that, and be like, well, look, man, we might come off as cannibals because they do look like us in a way. Maybe in a
Well,
sense, we just hide these bodies.
I mean, in most of the stories, or at least a great many of the stories, they were hunted, but in a lot of the tales, the giants were actually hunting people, and they would take over these villages and eat all the food, and just kind of like terrorize people. So they were hunted in that sense because they were just so mean and nasty. So yeah, there were definitely a campaign in some of these myths to get rid of the giants. And I mean, you see it in the pages of the Bible. Joshua and Caleb, in the Old Testament, they waged a war against the giants, and drove them out of the land because the Israelis couldn't take over their promised land because it was full of these giants and things like that. So over and
Why?
over in different stories, you see you see these people going to war against giants.
I see. That's weird. Why would there's be such a large amount of the religious community that doesn't want anything to do with that? Like, there's a lot of rejection, and when people have certain narratives that they that they, I guess, believe in, which I understand. But I'm more of the realm of open thought. Like, if
Yeah,
anybody has an idea, like my buddy's a flat earther, I'm not, but I'm
yeah,
more than happy to hear him out. So I get to these concepts where I'm like, on the academia site, I could pull up thousands of articles about like things like flat earth, hollow earth, all these types of things. People go, it's religiously not right. And I'm like, why does your community have such a disbelief of these types of things? If you do believe in a creator, if you do believe in a God, you think that he would just stop at what we see here? There's got to be more below the surface.
Well, I think in a lot of cases, like if you're talking people from a Christian persuasion, that a lot of your conservative Christians do believe in giants because they are in the pages of the Bible. But then there's a lot of Christians that don't, and I think that that they take that approach because anything that's that's in the pages that are fantastic or hard to believe or something that you can't see with your very eyes, they'll make excuses and things for the miracles in the Bible and anything that that's sort of hard to explain. Now, oh, that's just figurative. That's just figurative. And so I think, things like giants, they'll kind of write off, because it's fantastic, instead of looking for that kernel of truth in the stories.
Do you think maybe that the government's releasing a lot of this stuff is not, maybe it's an idea of religion is not as big as it used to be?
Well, yeah, I think definitely that's got a lot to do with it. And I
I mean,
and
it's
and I,
easier to spin a narrative if you want to trick people, like we were saying. If we were thinking about like
yeah,
a deceiving type thing, it's easier to say that because now you don't have the religious community attacking you.
yeah, and that for real, I think is a lot of the reason the government or at least elements within the government would not look into UFOs or things like that because there's a kind of a widespread belief, and this again would be in the very, very, very conservative Christian community, that things like UFOs and things like that are demonic in nature, and
Well, the aliens
you
are
know
depicted with black eyes and
yeah, and they were so that's demonic in nature. And within the higher ranks of the military, you have people uh coming from very conservative backgrounds. All your generals, seems like they all talk with a twang. They're from the Bible Belt, things like that. And there's a very large Christian element within the military. And that's one reason that the UFO issue, or my understanding, that it never was looked into as good as maybe it should have been, because if this stuff is demonic in nature, right, focusing on it, looking into it, paying attention to it, it would kind of in their minds be like opening a door, right? Opening yourself up. It's kind of like with demons, things like that. If you look at them, they look at you. If that makes sense. I know that sounds kind of like a weird tangent there that
well,
I'm going
that's
on.
there was a giant particle accelerator that stretched over 2.5 miles that they shut down in like 2014 because there was a fear that they would create black holes, and
Yeah, I remember that.
they've reopened it back up because they believe that there's other dimensions that they can open up one of these dimensions. So we've completely tossed that demon narrative or opening up the wrong door
Yeah,
out the window.
yeah, definitely. And I think I'm more talking like kind of in the old,
Yeah.
like in the older days. And I mean, you've seen it just from the time I was a kid. Everybody went to church when I was little. Now a lot of people do, but it seems most people don't. I mean, I don't.
Well, that's why I'm highlighting is that perspective change throughout
Yeah,
society, and it's not that in the grand scheme of society, that's not a big time gap. That's like a
no,
minute in it in
yeah,
the timeline of society. So I start to wonder, is like, what's the next minute gonna hold when I'm 60 or 70? I wonder what we're. I hope we're not dead by then. Mostly because I have a giant fear, not of global warming or any of that. I have a more of a giant fear that people are just gonna destroy themselves, and I don't know when that starts. It's gonna get really
yeah.
weird when I would have never thought they put people in camps at all.
No, No,
again. And they did
no,
that in Australia. So you
yeah,
start wondering, is like that ends up coming here. That ends up, everything always ends up trending somewhere else. Austria has just made it so if you're 12 and under and you haven't gotten vaccinated, you have to stay home. The only time you can ever leave is if you need to go to the grocery store or if you need
yeah.
to go for a walk.
Well, and I've read that that's actually getting ramped up. That they're starting lockdowns for vaccinated people too. Just because I guess the upticks in the numbers, and that's something I certainly never would have thought I would see. And maybe if it were like in the movies, right, the movies that you watch where something gets loose, you get it, you start bleeding out your eyes and everything, and you're dead 3 days later. But I mean, this is, and I don't mean to minimize the people
It
that
was
have gotten
sales
gotten
pitched
sick,
differently.
or but like this is not that, right? I mean, it's I mean, even if you're old, your chances are you're going to be okay if you do get this. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And it's just hard for me to believe that something as survivable as this has led to what we're seeing. But again, it's all it's I don't know what the end game is
Well,
here.
you think they would push a health game. They don't do
No,
that.
no, they're not. They want you to stay inside, order takeout, and watch
They
Netflix. I mean,
they
they're
they
not.
used to they used to sell you a fat burning pill on TV. Now they gave up that whole narrative. They're like, "Fuck it, make them fat. Let's just have them be
Yeah,
unhealthy as possible." You need to go outside. You need to
yeah.
move around. You need to eat healthy. There,
Sunshine, fresh air.
it's not that hard. I just think even if you add that 1 day a week, anything, there's a lot of people that just want to come home, eat like shit, and go to sleep. And sadly, I think that's because the world is a little bit tough and life is a little bit hard. You have to work your ass off. You're usually tired when you get home. But I also think it's like even if you didn't have to work anymore and you just had all your bills paid, what would you do with all your fucking free time? There are a lot of people would get a lot worse shape. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, and yeah, definitely. And I think that kind of goes back to circles back to what we were talking about, how how people have lost their desire to explore and to be outside. And if you got people that just want to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, and that's like all they do, and just order takeout and engage in all this fear, they're very easy to control.
Yeah. I don't know. I have faith in the world, but god damn it if they don't test it at times, man.
It makes it hard, don't it? Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm optimistic. I mean, I know I certainly don't sound that way with the things I've been saying, but um, when you when you get off social media, you go outside, you travel around, you'll see that what you see on TV, what you see on Facebook, what you see on on Twitter, that's not real life. And that's the good thing. Like you get in on Twitter, you're either like in an echo chamber where everybody thinks like you do, or if you're like me, you got a lot of followers from different perspectives. It seems like everybody's screaming at each other and all that, but Twitter's not real life, and I think that's something important for people to remember. Twitter, Facebook, that's not real life.
It's like when I like to go to a store that actually has a manual door where I
Yeah.
start walking up to it and someone opens it up for me. I'm like, oh, thank God. See, it's not as horrible as I saw on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you on social media and on the news, things like that, you just get the loudest people with the most extreme view or point that they want to get across. But people are basically good, and you know things are never as bad as you can kind of get to thinking from watching the news or hanging out on Facebook.
Couldn't agree more, man. Denver, you giving me enough of your time, brother, man. I really appreciate you doing my
Yeah, buddy.
podcast again, man. Is
Yeah.
there a place people can find you? Any of your links you want to say that so I can link it in the
Yeah,
description?
my website, denvermichaels.net. I post usually 1 to 2 blog posts a week. And if anybody wants to check out my books, just go to Amazon. Look me up on Amazon. All my books are there.
I'll make sure I link it all in the description. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap up the show?
No, man, I'm good. Just hope everybody is nice to each other. How about that?
I like that. Walk outside, get some fresh air.
Yeah, there
It'll
you go.
cheer you up.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Get some sunshine, fresh air, and it's all good, man.